My name is Martha Kingsley, and I am 82 years old. I have lived a full life, not without its pain and betrayals, but I never thought that the cruelest betrayal would come from my own blood. I spent most of my life nurturing others. My husband, my son, even my daughter-in-law. I gave everything I had, and when I say everything I mean it, my time, my home, my health, and in the end, almost my life. The night I returned from the hospital was not supposed to happen. They had sent me away in an ambulance 7 weeks earlier, convinced pneumonia would finish me off. My son Daniel even signed the release form with a trembling voice, hugging me like it was the last goodbye. Believed it too. I'd made peace with death. But death didn't want me yet. And life had one more twist left for me. I wasn't expected to come back that night. In fact, they didn't even know I'd been discharged early after recovering at a rehabilitation center in the countryside. The staff arranged a quiet ride home because I insisted. I didn't want to alert anyone. I just wanted to sit on my own porch again, maybe smell my gardenias, hear the rustle of the wind in the big oak tree by the kitchen window. But fate had something else waiting. It was past 10 p.m. The taxi dropped me at the end of the driveway because the gate was locked. I walked slowly, my cane tapping against the gravel like a warning bell. The house lights were on. I smiled faintly, thinking I'd surprise Daniel and his wife Janet. I imagined them crying tears of joy, rushing to help me through the door, calling me a miracle. That's what I expected. What I got was something else entirely. As I pushed open the side door with the spare key I'd never returned, I paused when I heard voices. Not the television. Not laughter. Just whispers. Stop. Something told me not to walk in just yet. Instead, I stood behind the half-open door, leaning against the wall, listening. So the death certificate will say she passed in her sleep, Janet whispered. That's clean. No questions. But we need to be careful. One drop too much and... She's old, Janet. It's not going to take much, Daniel said coldly. The sedatives are already in the tea blend. Once she drinks it, we wait. 2 hours max. And the inheritance is ours. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My own son, my only son, was plotting to kill me. For money. And his wife. She sounded like the mastermind. They believed I'd never come back. But now I was standing in their trap. And they had no idea I was listening. What would you have done? Walk in and confront them. Call the police. Or hide and find out how deep the evil runs. Let me take you back, before this horrifying night, before the tea, the poison, the betrayal. Because I should have seen the signs long ago. And maybe, just maybe, I chose not to. The day Daniel was born, I thought I'd been handed an angel. I never imagined the devil could wear my son's face. But it all started long before that night. Back when love blinded me. And slowly, quietly, my own family began to bury me alive, one betrayal at a time. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to hear what led me here, and how I turned the trap they set into their downfall. When Daniel was born, I was only 24 and full of so much hope. My husband, Harold, and I lived in a small cottage just outside of Birmingham, Alabama. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Daniel came into the world during a thunderstorm, wailing with such strength the nurses laughed and said, "This one's gonna rule the world." I believed them. I gave up my career as a schoolteacher to raise him. I spent every waking moment making sure he never lacked love. When he had nightmares, it was my arms he ran to. When he broke his leg at 10 from falling off a tree, I didn't sleep for 3 days. I would have laid my life down for him. But children don't always remember sacrifices. They remember what benefits them. Harold died young. A heart attack on a warm spring morning while tending to our garden. I was 47. Daniel was just beginning college. I remember holding Harold's cold hand, whispering, "Don't worry, I'll raise our boy right." But from that moment, everything began to shift. Daniel came home from college a different person. Sharper, colder, more distant. He didn't want to talk about his classes or his future. He only asked about the house, the land deed, and if there was a life insurance policy. First I thought it was just grief. I brushed it off the way mothers do. But every time I looked in his eyes, I saw less of the boy I raised and more of a man calculating something I couldn't yet name. Curiosity. Can you imagine watching your only son slowly become a stranger? When he married Janet, I hoped it would warm his heart. She was beautiful, sure, but always watching, never quite smiling. From the start, she treated me like I was some outdated piece of furniture. She'd sigh loudly when I walked into a room. "Daniel, your mom left crumbs on the table again." Or, "Martha, the way you fold the laundry makes it smell stale." I was still paying the mortgage on that house, yet I began to feel like a guest in my own home. 3 years ago, I finally signed the property over to Daniel. It was meant to be a gift, a symbol of trust and family. He hugged me and called me the most generous woman on earth. But from that moment on, I noticed how things changed. I wasn't asked, I was instructed. "Don't use that bathroom, Mom, it's for guests. We're having friends over, so maybe stay in your room." My room. In the house I once built from scratch. Then came the medication. I have arthritis, high blood pressure, and I've always kept organized notes of my prescriptions. But suddenly my pill bottles were out of place. One would be missing. Another switched. First I blamed myself. But one evening I overheard Janet on the phone whispering, "She's so forgetful, it'll be easy. We'll just say she mixed it up herself." That night I didn't sleep. I clutched my Bible and stared at the ceiling, realizing something terrifying. I was being erased slowly, gently, carefully. But curiosity keeps you quiet. You don't speak because what if you're wrong? What if you're imagining things? What if it's just old age playing tricks on you? Then came the day they sent me away. Caught pneumonia. A rough one. I collapsed in the kitchen and was rushed to the hospital. I remember holding Daniel's hand, gasping for air, and he leaned down and whispered, "You'll be all right, Mom. Just rest." But when I was wheeled into the ambulance, I looked back, and I swear I saw relief on his face. Not fear. Not worry. Relief. The hospital did their part. I fought like hell to survive. And when I pulled through, they offered me time at a rehabilitation center for elderly patients. I agreed, hoping that maybe time apart would bring Daniel back to me. That maybe he missed me. That maybe he'd visit. He didn't. Not once. Curious, isn't it? A son whose mother nearly died didn't even call. That's when the nurse at the center handed me a letter that changed everything. A letter sent by mistake. Addressed to Daniel and Janet. Inside was an invoice. From a law office. Request for confirmation of updated beneficiary. Ms. Martha Kingsley's estate transfer request under consideration. Pending death certificate. I felt my chest tighten. I asked the nurse to read it aloud again. She didn't want to, but she did. I was being declared half dead. Before I was even cold. So I made a plan. Told no one. I waited until my breathing was steady, my legs were strong, and I could walk again without the wheeled support. I called a taxi with what little money I had in a side account and made my way back to the house I once called home. And now, here I am, listening to my son and his wife plan my murder over chamomile tea. They believe I'm a ghost. But I'm very much alive. And now that I know their game, I intend to flip the board. What do you think I should do? Walk in and act normal? Pretend to be fragile? Or should I disappear, quietly, and build my own revenge? Trust me, you haven't heard the worst yet. Because what I found hidden in the basement just hours later changed everything. Please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what happened next. Because the quietest grandma can become the fiercest storm. I didn't make a sound. Still leaning against the side door, I held my breath as their voices faded into the kitchen. My fingers were trembling, not from fear but from rage. Rage so quiet it felt like ice in my veins. My son. My flesh and blood. And that woman, Janet, sitting at my kitchen table, plotting my end like it was a dinner menu. I backed out quietly and slipped into the garden, my cane sinking softly into the soil I once tilled with Harold. My eyes welled up, not just from what I heard, but from what I finally understood. I wasn't just unwanted. I was disposable, replaceable, a ticking time bomb with a bank account. But they'd made one mistake. They thought I was already gone. I needed time to think. If I made a scene, they'd have me carted off again, this time permanently. I walked to the shed, the one Harold and I built during our second year of marriage. I still had a key hidden beneath the stone frog near the old azalea bush. I reached for it, slid the rusted key into the lock, and creaked the door open. Inside was dust, cobwebs, and memories. But more importantly, it was safe. Now, that night I didn't sleep. I sat on a wooden crate, wrapped in an old quilt, going over every word they said. She won't know, just a sip, signatures already forged. My mind played their betrayal like a record stuck on repeat. Curious, isn't it? How silence becomes your only weapon when you're outnumbered. By sunrise I had a plan. First I needed proof. Not just of their intentions, but of their actions. My words wouldn't be enough. The world listens to the young, not the old. Especially not the old women who are too often labeled confused or sick when they start telling inconvenient truths. I waited until the house was quiet again. Janet had gone to her job at the law office. Daniel was upstairs working remotely. I crept to the side of the house and lifted the loose panel of the laundry window, something I remembered Daniel never bothered to fix. I slid inside and tiptoed to the pantry, grabbed some crackers, a bottle of water, and tucked myself back out into the shed. But before I closed the door, something caught my eye. A folded tarp in the corner, unusually neat. I tugged it away and found a black duffel bag underneath it. Heavy. I unzipped it, and my heart dropped. Stacks and stacks of $100 bills, along with a passport that didn't belong to either of them. Forged name. Ticket to Mexico. Dated for next week. They weren't just planning to kill me. They were planning to vanish. I stepped back, nearly knocking over a rake. My hand went to my mouth. All this time I thought I was being paranoid. But no, they were serious. This wasn't desperation. This was methodical, premeditated, and cold-blooded. How long had they been planning this? I thought of calling the police right then. But something stopped me. If I called too soon without proof, they might flip it on me. Say I was losing my mind. Say I forged the documents myself. I'd be locked in a care facility before I could blink. And all they had to do was wait. But what if I flipped the script? What if I made them think their plan was working? I returned to the house the next day like nothing happened. Janet dropped her teacup when I walked into the living room. Daniel stammered. Mom? What are you doing here? Smiled. Doctor said I was well enough to come home. Didn't they call you? Silence. Janet recovered first. Of course they did. Must have slipped our minds. We've just been so busy preparing your room. I sat down slowly on the floral armchair near the fireplace, my old chair, the one she tried to throw out last year. I glanced at the tea kettle whistling in the kitchen. You were making tea. Janet blinked. Yes. Want a cup? I looked her dead in the eye. Sure. Love one. But maybe I'll make mine myself this time. I miss the old blends I used to prepare. She hesitated, then nodded, lips twitching into a fake smile. Daniel left the room shortly after that. I watched him through the hallway mirror, pacing in the dining room, already making calls. Whispering. Nervous. They weren't just surprised I returned. They were afraid. But let them be. That night, I poured the tea Janet brought me straight into the fern outside my window. In the morning the plant was dead. Wilted like it had been poisoned. Curious, isn't it? How something meant to kill could give you life. I started recording everything. Every conversation, every slip, every look. I found an old recording device Harold had hidden in his tool chest years ago for work disputes. I tucked it in my robe. Every time Daniel visited my room, every time Janet asked if I was sleeping well, I pressed that button. One night I caught a gem. Janet. You sure it'll work this time? Daniel. Yes. Tonight. He's weak. Just needs one last cup. And I'll call the doctor in the morning like it was natural. That was the proof I needed. But the real turning point came the night I followed Daniel into the basement. He always kept it locked. Said it was where he worked on confidential projects. But that night, I watched from the staircase as he unlocked it and disappeared inside. 10 minutes later, he came back up, empty-handed. Once he left, I grabbed the keys I'd stolen from his drawer earlier and went down. And what I found there? Blueprints, legal documents, my death certificate already filled out. Damn. Backdated to last month. They were already writing me out of existence. And in the corner, crate, labeled in big red letters. Biohazard. Opened it. And what was inside will haunt me forever. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to know what was in that crate, and how I used it to turn their evil back on them. Because this old woman was done being prey. Next chapter. Everything changes. The moment I pulled the lid off that crate, the air in the basement turned cold. My fingers trembled as I peeled back layers of plastic, revealing a tangle of vials, syringes, and sealed silver packets. Each item was labeled in sharp, precise handwriting. Janet's handwriting. She had always been meticulous, organized, dangerous. At the center of it all sat a small notebook. I opened it with dread pooling in my stomach. Inside were pages of detailed instructions, dosage charts, names of sedatives, estimated onset to expiration timelines. On one page I saw my own name. Martha K. 2.5 milliliters, oral, within 3 hours, cardiac arrest expected. I dropped the book like it burned. My mouth went dry. I backed away from the crate, suddenly aware that I was standing in the middle of a premeditated murder plot, carefully documented and preserved, like I was just another science experiment. These weren't just twisted ideas. These were active steps in a plan that was already in motion. My own son and his wife had drawn a roadmap to my death. Can you imagine what that feels like? Not just being unloved, but being calculated against. I quickly took photos with a small phone I'd hidden in my robe's lining, one that Janet didn't know I had. Then I wrapped the crate the way I found it and quietly locked the door again. For the next 2 days, I pretended like I knew nothing. Janet served me bland soup with a too sweet smile. Daniel kept asking if I was sleeping well. Smiled back, nodded, gave them nothing. Let them believe I was still their puppet, weak, confused, and fragile. But every night I was laying traps of my own. I emailed the photos to a trusted friend from church, Elaine, a retired paralegal with a heart like a lion. I didn't have to explain much. She responded within hours. Gather everything. I'm on it. The next morning, Daniel came into my room holding a new document. He sat beside me like a son concerned for his mother. "Mom," he said gently, "we need to get your affairs in order. You know, just in case." "In case of what?" I asked, pretending to be slow. He laughed awkwardly. "Nothing. Just, you never know. Janet and I thought it would be a good idea to update your will." My heart pounded. He slid the papers toward me. Pages and pages of legal jargon I was never meant to understand. But I'd seen enough in that basement to know this was a weapon, not a document. They were trying to make it look like I signed everything away. I ran my fingers over the edge and gave a small smile. "You think of everything, Daniel." His smile faltered. Later that day, I slipped the documents into my knitting bag and made my way to the garden under the excuse of fresh air. Elaine was waiting by the side gate with a firm hug and a fire in her eyes. She took one look at the papers and said, "They're trying to declare you mentally unfit. Sign these and they can put you away, permanently." I had never known betrayal like this. And yet somehow, I wasn't broken. I was boiling. We made a plan. The next step. Go deeper. Let them talk. Let them confess. Let the noose tighten without ever knowing it was there. That night, I brewed my own tea and asked Janet to sit with me. I told her I wanted to make peace. Told her I'd had a dream about Harold and he told me to trust my family. I said I was tired of fighting. She softened. like a snake curling before it strikes. We just want what's best for you, she said, taking my hand. You've lived a long, good life, Martha. It's okay to let go. I looked her in the eye. You're right. I'm ready. From the hallway I saw Daniel watching us. Lane. Sinker. The next evening I played weak. Let myself wheeze a little more. I even knocked over my cane in the living room. Janet rushed over. You poor thing, she said. Maybe it's time we help ease your suffering. You deserve to rest. The monster was finally revealing its full face. I recorded it all. The next day, I told them I wanted to sign the will, but only in front of a notary. They hesitated but then agreed, thinking they had finally won. They didn't know the notary would be Elaine in disguise. She arrived that evening dressed like a visiting legal aid. Daniel looked nervous. Janet kept checking her watch. I played my part to perfection. But just before I lifted the pen I paused. You know, I said softly, it's funny. You both have such different handwriting. Janet blinked. What? I looked her in the eye. The handwriting in the basement is yours. The poison logs. The death certificates. Even the passport. You might want to fix that in the future. Silence. Daniel stood. What are you talking about? Elaine stood too. We've got everything, Mr. Kingsley. The recordings, the documents, and the poison stash. You're finished. Their faces. I'll never forget it. Janet lunged for my phone. Elaine stepped between us. Daniel backed into the hallway, muttering, "This wasn't how it was supposed to go." But it did. Exactly how I planned it. Elaine made the call. Police were en route. But before they arrived, Daniel made one last desperate move. He ran out the back door, toward the basement. When the cops came, they found Janet frozen in the kitchen, crying, shaking. But Daniel, he wasn't anywhere to be found. Least not yet. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to know what happened when they opened that basement door, and the horrifying discovery they made underneath the stairs. Because the story of my return was only the beginning. The police arrived in a flurry of blue lights and clipped voices, their boots echoing on the front porch like thunder. I sat on the floral sofa with Elaine beside me, her hand resting gently on my knee. Janet stood frozen in the kitchen, her mascara streaked down her cheeks like war paint, muttering over and over, I didn't mean to. But Daniel was gone. 2 officers cleared the upstairs. Another combed through the backyard. But it was Officer Hendricks, a tall, quiet man with sharp eyes, who turned the knob to the basement and took that first slow step down the creaking wooden stairs. I could hear his voice echo faintly. This door was locked? Yes, I answered from the living room. Only Daniel had the keys. Seconds later, another officer joined him. I held my breath. Then came the yell. Sergeant! You better come down here. The next moments were chaos. Radio calls, flashlights, bags of evidence. And the look on Sergeant Monroe's face when he re-emerged from the basement told me everything I needed to know. There's a lot down there, she said, her voice low. Your son's been planning this for a long time, ma'am. There are forged IDs, hidden cash, medical records that don't belong to you, but with your name on them. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. And under the stairs, a sleeping bag, food wrappers, water jugs. Looks like someone's been hiding down there. Recently. My stomach twisted. Janet gasped from the kitchen. He was going to leave me behind, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. He packed everything for himself. The officers took her away, quietly, without a struggle. She didn't even look at me as they placed her in the squad car. Her shoulders sagged like a deflated balloon, as if all the poison she poured into my life had finally come back to drown her. But Daniel was still out there. That night I didn't sleep, not even a little. I lay in my bed, my own bed, not the guest room they shoved me into, and stared at the ceiling wondering, was he watching me now? Was he close? Was he armed? I checked the windows twice, pulled every curtain shut, locked every latch. Curious, isn't it? How the very child you gave life to can become the thing you fear most in the world. 2 days passed. Elaine stayed with me. Officers patrolled. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Everyone suddenly remembered how Janet never let me come to the HOA meetings. How Daniel never smiled anymore. How they never had visitors. How quickly the roses I planted were ripped out for surveillance cameras and security fences. And then, on the 3rd day it happened. I was outside, watering the last of my marigolds, when I heard a twig snap near the side of the shed. I turned slowly, heart in my throat. There he was. Daniel. Disheveled. Dirty. Wildeite. His shirt was torn, and he clutched a metal pipe in his hand. "Mom," he said, stepping forward. I didn't move. He looked thinner already. His lips cracked from dehydration. His face was sunburned and pale all at once. "You told them everything," he muttered. "I saw the news. You called the police on your own son." I stood straighter. I did what any mother would do when her life is being hunted like a dog in the street. He flinched. "I loved you," I said, voice shaking. "I still do. But I will not die quietly just because you want my bank account." He stepped closer. "They'll believe me, Mom. I'll say you're confused. You're old. They'll say this was elder abuse, your abuse. I'll say you hit Janet. That you threatened us." I reached behind me and pressed the small button on the recorder in my apron pocket. "Say it louder," I said. "Say it all." He paused, eyes narrowing. "You think you're clever. I think I survived," I whispered. "And that makes me dangerous." Suddenly he lunged. But before he could reach me, a sharp crack rang through the air. Elaine stepped from the porch, holding my old shotgun. Her hands didn't tremble. "Don't move," she said calmly. Daniel stopped mid-charge. The look on his face. Like a child caught stealing candy. Only this time the stakes were life or death. The police arrived minutes later. As they hauled him away in cuffs, he turned back to me. "You ruined everything." "No," I said. "I saved myself. That's something you never thought I'd be strong enough to do." The neighborhood watched in silence. Curtains parted. Phones filmed. The forgotten old woman had become headline news. But the damage was done. Daniel and Janet's names were dragged through every news outlet in the state. Elder abuse conspiracy. Inheritance poison plot. Mother outsmarts her own killers. And yet, as I sat on my porch that night, the garden lights glowing softly, something still ached. He was my son. My baby. And somewhere deep down, I still remembered the boy who once clutched my finger and called me Mama. But he made his choice. And I had made mine. I turned the porch light off and whispered to the darkness. "It's over." Or so I thought. Because the next morning I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a copy of a second will. Not mine. Janet's. And what it revealed made my blood run cold. Please like, comment, and subscribe because this rabbit hole just got deeper than I ever imagined. And in next chapter, I'll tell you how Janet had one final card to play from behind bars. The envelope was thick, heavy. Its edges curled like it had passed through many hands, but there was no return address, no sender name, no stamp. Just my name scribbled in red ink across the front. Martha Kingsley. Elaine found it first, resting inside my mailbox like a warning or maybe a dare. "It's probably junk," she said. But I knew better. My bones told me so. I opened it slowly, my fingers stiff with age and tension. Inside was a folded document, legal paper not photocopied, and beneath it a yellow sticky note with just 4 words. "It's not over. J." I read the will. It was Janet's. Notarized. With official stamps and legal markings I recognized instantly. She drafted it from her own law office. But this wasn't a will leaving anything to Daniel. No. This one was more sinister. It named me as her legal guardian. Effective only if she were deemed unfit or institutionalized. And in the event of her death or incapacitation, every asset, every account, every bond, even her mother's home, would be frozen unless I approved it. That wasn't all. Attached to it was a letter, clearly written before her arrest. A confession or maybe a manipulation. It read, "If you're reading this, it means things didn't go as planned. Maybe Daniel betrayed me first. Maybe you lived. But I always plan 2 steps ahead, Martha. It's my insurance. You're tied to me now. If anything happens to me, if I die in prison, you'll be investigated. Thoroughly. I made sure of it. There are records, letters, transfers, all of it. Be careful what you do next." My vision blurred. Janet had tied my name to her criminal mess. She wanted to make sure that even behind bars, her poison would bleed into my life. That I could never truly escape her shadow. I took the papers to Elaine, who read them in silence. "This is layered," she muttered. "She's not dumb. This was premeditated in ways we didn't even consider." "You think she planned for Daniel to turn on her?" "Yes." Elaine looked me in the eyes. "I think she always knew he would." The next morning I received another call. This time from a correctional officer. "Mrs. Kingsley," he said, "we thought you should know. Janet was transferred last night. Special housing unit. She was attacked." My stomach dropped. "Is she alive?" "She's stable but sedated. Won't be speaking for a while." It should have comforted me. But instead I felt dread. Because silence was her weapon. She used it better than words. Elaine insisted we go to the courthouse to officially revoke the document naming me her guardian. We submitted affidavits, photos, proof of coercion. The process would take weeks, maybe months. In the meantime, everything she owned was legally tangled with me. And then strange things began to happen. Lights in the house flickered. Files on my computer went missing. One afternoon, I returned from grocery shopping to find every photo frame in my hallway turned backward. Faces of my family flipped against the wall like ghosts retreating. I didn't tell the police right away. What would I say? That a woman in jail is still haunting me from the inside? But I did buy cameras. Installed them in every corner of the house. I watched those feeds every night, like a sentry guarding a secret. And one evening, I saw something I'll never forget. 2:13 a.m. The hallway camera flickered. Figure passed. Not Daniel. Not Janet. Someone else. A man, tall, wearing a black hoodie, face hidden. He moved like he knew the house. Like he had keys. He walked into the basement. And never came back up. Called the police. They found no one. But they did find something else. In the crawl space behind the furnace, tucked inside a rusted toolbox, was a flash drive. Wrapped in a velvet ribbon. Inside, dozens of video files. Secret recordings. Janet and Daniel. Talking. Planning. Laughing. Naming every step of the plan. And even hinting at people who helped them. It wasn't just the 2 of them. There were others. Investors. Family, friends. Even a former doctor of mine who'd signed off on questionable documents. Janet's web was wider than I imagined. And in one file, I heard my own voice. Puffing. "Janet. Take a breath for me, Martha. Good, now just close your eyes. The medicine will kick in soon. Daniel. How long before she stops breathing? Janet. 3 hours. Maybe less if we add just a drop more." Made my skin crawl. I was a test subject in my own home. But now I had everything I needed. Not just to clear my name, but to burn their whole empire down. Elaine and I drove to the district attorney's office the next morning. We submitted the drive. The recordings. A letter. The will. The DA didn't even blink. "This isn't just a case," she said. "This is going to be a storm. Elder abuse. Fraud. Conspiracy. Corruption. Your story's going to change the law, Mrs. Kingsley." I didn't care about the headlines. I didn't want justice for attention. I wanted peace. And maybe revenge. But I hadn't seen Daniel since the day he was arrested. Until 2 weeks later. When he sent me a letter. Just 5 words. "I'm getting out. Watch yourself. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to hear what happened when my son tried to finish what he started, and what I had to do to finally end it." The letter was creased like he'd clenched it in his fist before sealing it. I stared at the 5 words over and over. I'm getting out. Watch yourself. It was short, vague, but filled with a threat colder than death itself. Elaine was the first to speak when she read it. That's not a warning. It's a promise. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the old rocking chair on the porch, wrapped in the same knitted shawl I made for Daniel when he was 10. The irony made my chest ache. Every stitch held love. Now every fiber scratched like regret. By morning I had called Officer Hendricks. He confirmed what I feared. Daniel had been granted bail. The system didn't care that he tried to poison his own mother. Didn't care that he forged wills, falsified documents, and plotted with his wife to erase me from the earth. His lawyer had spun a narrative of misunderstood intentions and family misunderstandings. And with Janet silenced behind psych evaluation and lawyers scrambling to separate her mess from his, the DA needed more time to bring everything to court. Daniel had money, and influence, and now freedom. He's not allowed near your home, Hendricks assured me. The restraining order is active. You'll be protected. But I knew better. You can't restrain evil with paper. So I did what I always do. I prepared. I reinforced the locks. Installed backup batteries for the cameras. Bought a second phone with a silent panic button. I even installed a steel bar across my bedroom door at night. But what I didn't expect was how quickly he would strike. It was 3 nights after his release. I woke to the sound of glass shattering in the kitchen. Froze. Then I heard it. Voice. Mocking. You always did love the sound of your garden chimes, Mom. Pity they won't wake anyone tonight. My blood turned to stone. I reached for the panic phone beneath my pillow and pressed the silent alert. Then I grabbed the crowbar I'd stashed behind the headboard and moved to the door. Quiet. Steady. The hallway light was flickering again. Just like before. Footsteps padded over broken glass. He was inside. I cracked the door open just an inch and saw him. Daniel. Wearing black. Gloves on. Hair slicked back like when he was in high school. His eyes were hollow. Not empty. Hollow. Like everything inside had been drained and replaced with something foreign. I just want to talk, he said softly, standing in the living room. We can end this, Mom. We can make it clean. Clean. Like a surgical cut. He reached into his coat. And in that moment I didn't wait. I slammed the crowbar against the hallway wall, the sound exploding like thunder. It startled him just long enough for me to bolt from the room. I ran through the laundry room, out the side door and into the yard. The moon was full, casting long shadows across the garden. Behind me I heard his footsteps. Faster. Closer. But then headlights. Red and blue. Sirens blaring. Elaine had been watching the cameras from her house across the street. The second she saw movement, she called Hendricks directly. The cops tackled Daniel just feet from where I stood near the old oak tree. As they cuffed him, he screamed, "You'll regret this, old woman. That house should have been mine. You were supposed to die." And that's when I finally broke. I stepped forward. Looked him dead in the eye. "I did die, Daniel. The day you stopped being my son." He snarled, fought against the cuffs, spit hitting the ground. But the officers didn't flinch. They shoved him into the back of the car and shut the door. This time no bail. The judge had seen enough. But I wasn't done. The next morning I called the press. I told my story. In camera. In detail. Every betrayal. Every document. Every ounce of abuse hidden behind fake smiles and sweet tea. And it went viral. Other elders came forward. Daughters. Caregivers. All speaking up about the abuse hidden inside family homes. The DA reopened old cases. Laws were proposed. Protections enforced. Daniel and Janet's House of Horrors became a landmark case. But the greatest moment came 6 weeks later. The trial began. The courtroom was packed. The DA played the audio recordings, showed the poison logs, the forged will, the video of Daniel's midnight break-in. When it was my turn on the stand, I looked straight at Daniel and said, "You tried to bury me alive with your lies. But I crawled back up through the dirt and dragged your secrets into the light." He didn't look away. But he didn't smile either. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty. On all counts. Janet's turn would come later. She had more layers to unravel. But her day was coming. I walked out of that courtroom into a breeze that felt like freedom. For the first time in years I felt safe. But just when I thought the story was finally over, an officer approached me outside. "Mrs. Kingsley, one last thing." He handed me a sealed envelope. No return address. Inside was a note. One sentence. "The house isn't done telling its secrets. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to hear what I found hidden inside the attic of my home just days later." Secrets that proved Daniel and Janet were only part of the story. And what I discovered next made me question everything I thought I knew about my own husband. I stared at the envelope in my hand, the words, "The house isn't done telling its secrets," etched in blocky handwriting, all uppercase, like someone wanted to shout without sound. No name. No stamp. No postmark. Just another ghost rising from the ashes of a life I thought I'd already buried. I should have thrown it away. I should have walked back inside and burned it with the rest of the poison. But something about the weight of that envelope, something about the house going silent in that moment, made me know deep in my marrow. This wasn't over. Elaine sat beside me on the porch. "You want me to open it?" I shook my head. "No. If there's something in this house I don't know about, I need to be the one to face it." That night I didn't rest. I retraced every step I had ever taken in that house. Every floorboard I had scrubbed. Every nail Harold hammered. Every drawer, vent, creak in the walls that once sounded like lullabies but now felt like warnings. And then it hit me. The attic. Harold's attic. He always kept it locked. Told me it was just for old tools and man things. I never had reason to go up there. For 50 years I respected that boundary. But now I needed the truth more than I needed nostalgia. I dug through the old desk drawers until I found the brass key with the green string. Harold's attic key. I hadn't touched it in 3 decades. I climbed those narrow stairs slowly, the wood groaning under each step like the house itself was protesting. The air grew colder, drier. And when I turned the key in the attic door, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just an attic. It was a vault. Old file cabinets. Stacks of ledgers. A trunk with Harold's initials carved into it. And in the far corner, covered in a dusty white sheet, was a small safe I had never seen before. My fingers shook as I wiped the dust from the top. Inside the trunk, I found boxes of old photos, newspaper clippings, and a faded brown envelope with a single word on the front. "In case she ever finds out." Opened it. There were letters. Letters Harold had written, but never sent. The first one began, "Martha, if you're reading this, I failed to protect you. I never wanted to bring this into our home, but I had no choice. They threatened you. They threatened Daniel. So I did what I had to do." My stomach twisted. He wrote about a group of men, former business partners, who came to him in the early 80s. They were laundering money through local construction jobs, using shell companies, and Harold had unknowingly signed off on a few of the permits. When he realized what he was involved in, it was too late. Backing out meant risking our lives. So he hid everything. The attic became the graveyard for his guilt. The letters described hush money, silent transactions, people he kept at a distance for fear they'd touch our family. But the most shocking revelation. He mentioned Janet's father. I tried to cut ties with Lawrence Miller after the Birmingham job went south, but he came back years later, said his daughter was getting close to Daniel, wanted to marry in, said it'd tie things up, secure the family. I didn't want it, but I kept quiet. I didn't want to lose our son. I didn't want to lose you. Janet hadn't just married Daniel by chance. Her father had orchestrated it. Their marriage wasn't love, it was leverage. A long con to reclaim power over the Kingsley name. And the safe. Inside was a black journal. Harold's handwriting front to back. He listed every transaction, every fake permit, every threat he received. And clipped to the last page was a death certificate. Lawrence Miller. But the date. 4 years after Janet told us her father had died in a car accident. He hadn't died then. He had vanished, changed names, started over. And now he was truly dead. But not before setting this entire nightmare in motion. I stared at the attic wall and whispered, "How deep does this go?" Elaine was speechless when I showed her everything. "The Dia needs this," she said. "This isn't just about Daniel and Janet. This is generational. This is organized." The trial took another turn. Daniel, already behind bars, now faced new charges. Money laundering, conspiracy, racketeering. Janet, still in the institution, was declared mentally competent and ordered to stand trial as well. Her lawyers screamed about entrapment, about decades-old crimes, about trauma. But the evidence was too thick to slip through. The judge ordered the attic evidence preserved as part of a federal investigation. And as the case expanded, names began to fall. People we once called neighbors, business owners, even a former deputy. The house, my house, had hidden an empire of lies. But now, it was all burning. And when the final hearing came, I stood once more in that courtroom, the weight of the attic's truth behind me. I read from Harold's letter, showed the photos, told them how I found the lies beneath my floorboards. I was almost buried in that house, first by the people I trusted, and then by the secrets they left behind. But I chose to dig. And now, no one else has to. The court sentenced Daniel to life. Janet received 30 years without parole. The property was cleared. The bank accounts frozen. The ties severed. And I finally sold the house. Moved into a quiet cottage near the lake. Small place. Sunlight in every room. No secrets in the walls. But even here, some nights I still dream of that attic door. Still hear Harold's voice whispering apologies. Still feel the weight of everything I survived. And I tell myself, you were never weak. They were just afraid of your strength. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the quiet power in standing up for yourself, no matter your age, please like, comment, and subscribe. Because somewhere out there, another Martha is fighting to be heard. And maybe your share is the one that gives her the courage to speak.